The Toyota Yaris is of course one of Toyota's most selling cars, which is understandable because it offers a lot of value. But these days we all want higher and bigger, which is why Toyota also offers the Cross edition of the Yaris. My name is Peter, and in this video we're going to have a look at this Cross Yaris to see what's what and if this is the one you should get over the normal Yaris, of course. Starting here at the front, well, obviously it's all mostly going to be a bit higher and a bit more rough SUV-like. Toyota calls this an SUV, I call it a crossover. It is basically a Yaris on stilts. This is the launch edition, so this is the top of the line spec. And it is visible here on the front with some nice LED lights and some nice LED headlights. Down here are the blinkers, so this is not part of your LED daytime running lights, but this is your indicators. Down here also some fog lights, and overall it is exactly what you imagine a Yaris on stilts is. If we move to the side, it becomes a bit more apparent with these sort of bigger wheel arches with a lot of plastic on it, a lot of plastic down here for extra sills, and of course the big badge here that says Yaris Cross. So overall, you know, it's all a bit rougher. You can call it fake if you want to, but it's a little bit higher, and that is actually what the market demands these days. You can see that it's not a particularly large car with 4.17 meters long. It's about 1.70 meters wide as well. Which doesn't make it a big car in any way, shape or form, but it's certainly not a tiny car like, for example, the Aygo that Toyota also offers. It is a bit more mature than that. I think there's enough space inside, as we'll see in a bit, for people and things. And this is a car that gives you a lot of options. It's enough to transport your family around if you want to. Maybe not enough to go on a full ski holiday, but certainly very usable in 90% of the cases. And that makes it very versatile in the way you deploy this car, which is always very nice. When we walk around to the back, you can see this nice two-tone color scheme, by the way. This continues in the back as well, and I think here we have a very Toyota back of the car with these horizontal lights, big logo in the middle. I think it looks quite nice. Here we have a bit more cross bumpering and so on, and overall I think it is a relatively okay car to look at. Nothing too shocking. I don't think any of these crossovers is particularly elegant, but this car, it looks okay. Here in the back, obviously, we've got to have a look at the boot, which is electric in this version, if we can get the button. Look at the lights. They're normal lights, not LEDs. Slightly questionable. And there's actually quite a few questionable decisions here in the back. Starting with this thing. This is a sort of fabric nylon thing that is supposed to be your partial shelf. No, that's just not okay. It's too budget. It's not okay. Not something you really want to deal with on a daily basis. The boot itself is about 400 liters, so that's a good capacity, enough for a weekend away, some sports stuff for your kid, groceries, a small trip to IKEA. Always well, really, with 400 liters. But there's a few interesting things here. So first of all, we have the floor. All is well, but the floor is a two-part sort of take-out puzzle piece to reveal the double extra space here in the bottom. Now, not really sure why this is the case, because this is about this high. I'm not really sure what you're going to put there that gives you the need to put an extra floor on top of it. Especially not because if we go one level down, there is another false floor with some storage space there where you normally would put a spare wheel. So if you need to carry oil, batteries, gloves, who knows what else you carry, snow chains, you can put it all there. And I don't really see any reason to put it in an extra thin layer. Why would you not have that available at all times? And then you have to deal with these things constantly, that you have to either take out completely and lay around somewhere or put them back in and out constantly. So I'm not really sure about that design. I'm also not really sure about this here. You might wonder what that is. We'll see later when we look in the rear seats that these are the cup holders for the central armrest for the back passengers. It's just not a good look. I mean, how difficult it is to cover that and make that a little bit nicer. Not sure. But so that's the boot, very functional, like I said, again, good capacity that you can actually use. But yeah, things like this sort of ruin the experience a little bit. Obviously, we got to do a little cockpit tour here through the Yaris Cross. And getting in here and sitting down, you immediately notice that you're a bit higher up than in the standard Yaris. So as far as that goes, that Cross feeling continues here on the inside. The cabin around me is very functional, and that's a word you got to remember. And there's also some areas where you can spot some cost savings. The first one and the most noticeable one is here on the side. When you look at the window controls, so there's no indication of what these are for at all. Obviously you know what they do, but there's also only a light here on the top left one. So when you're driving at night, only this one lights up and you sort of have to guess where the other ones are. You can say that's absolute nonsense and they should put the stickers at least on there or put backlit buttons on there. But if you save a little bit of money that way, and there's several points around the car where you do that, and if you operate at the scale that Toyota does, then it all adds up to cost savings across the board. So there's several examples of that throughout the whole car, but that's just the way it is. When we do the tour, we start here on the left with piano black in the area where you put your hand the most, which makes no sense to me, but you guys know how I feel about piano black. And we have a very 1980s button here in the door handle, so opening the door this way, and you can lock it with this button. So normally that's an electronic button or something that happens automatically when you start driving. Here it is a manual switch. That makes me feel old because this is something that my parents had in their car back in the 1980s. Standard window and mirror control, that's good. The wheel is also very simple. It's just round with real buttons. 2 joysticks, 1 on each side. Very functional. All your cruise control stuff is on the right. All your stereo and all your system stuff is on the left. Pretty straightforward, it works, it's very functional, but when you press these things, again, you feel that it's not the last word in quality buttons or anything, and even the joysticks, they feel a little bit sharp and mushy. We got some traditional stalks here behind the wheel for your indicators and your wipers, and then we have the digital display in front of me in combination with a head-up display in this version. The digital display is a bit busy, there's quite a lot of symbols and things going on there. But the main thing that you'll have a look at is obviously your speed, but obviously your power meter at the left side of the screen that tells you in which mode you're driving, because this is of course a hybrid. It's not the last word in graphics either. You can change a few things on what you want to see on there, your maps, your settings and your consumption and so on, and you can change the style of the dials a bit, but you know, it's all, again, it's very functional, but it's not the last word in graphic design, and the same goes for the head-up display. It also really goes for the screen here in the middle. So this is a stand-up unit here in the middle of the cockpit, and it works. There's nothing going wrong here, but it is all very basic. I mean, looking at this, you can see how simplified it all is and how this is really all the kind of interface that you get. So, you know, it's nothing really crazy. You know, it all works. It's very functional, but yeah, it feels a bit dated in terms of style and design. But that's not to say it doesn't work. I mean, it does everything you want it to do. Because some manual vents underneath, and we have the climate unit is this giant thing here in the middle, also covered in piano black. But it has some real buttons here. So there's actual buttons to adjust your ventilation speed and to do your demisting and so on, which is very nice because you know, you don't have to go to the screen or anything for that. You can just adjust it all here. Simple knobs to turn to change the temperature, and you know, that's just simple, classic, and it works. I like this. It's a good solution. It's not in the way or anything. If they could make it slightly less glossy, it would be nice, but this just works, which is good. What's not so good is the switches for the seat heating. This is a version with seat heating, great. So normally this is a button that you press 1 to 3 times and then a 4th time to turn it off, great. This though is an actual switch, like a light switch, so I can physically switch it on to low and on to high, which in itself is not much of an issue, but the fact that it's switched now so it stays there is an issue when you get out of the car. But the fact that it's switched now and it stays in high in this setting and it doesn't reset by itself is an issue when you get out of the car. So when you park, get out, it stays here, which means when you get back in, your seat heating is still on. Now you might say, yeah, that's logical because when you were cold once, you're going to be cold twice. But it's not necessary that this is a switch. Why is this not a button? I don't really get it. But that is something you have to live with. Down there we got some inductive charging here for my phone. It's also a bit of a storage cubby. You can see my garage clickers in here, and there's a 12-volt socket back there as well. And you got 2 USBs here for your system connection and for your charging. The gear lever is quite large. I'm not really sure why this is still this shape and size, but okay, it works. Covered in some, or surrounded rather, by some piano black, but very simple park, reverse, neutral, D and B. And we got a few extra buttons here in the middle, of course, for your self-parking, your driving modes, your EV modes, if you want to drive it that way. your parking brake and your auto hold. Flanked by a bit of cup holding. And here, this is the armrest that doesn't really offer anything in terms of storage, but you can actually open it. And you have a little area here for whatever it is that you fit in there. So all around, it's a very functional cabin and it works. Like I said, it's very, very black on black on black. Thanks to the panoramic roof, obviously it is nice and light in here, but if we don't have that, I can actually close it because it's manual. You can see how quickly it darkens up in here. So if you have the option to pick the panoramic roof, I would certainly recommend that. So right now we are in a parking garage, just to show you how dark it gets in this car. Obviously we have the black interior, but it is so dark in here. You can see there's hardly any light here in the front apart from the two screens. Obviously you can see your climate control, and there's some buttons on the steering wheel that you can see sort of faintly. But it is very dark in here, and especially when I pull back, I'm sitting behind the driver's seat now. Here in the back it is pitch black. And even when I open the door, it makes no difference, because you can see there is no light source at all here in the back. All you have is these two dome lights here in the front, and that's all the illumination you get. So when you're driving at night and you have kids back here, for example, they are really, really in the dark. And if you need to tend to the kids somehow in the dark, well, good luck with that. So driving this Yaris Cross across town at the moment, what can we make of this driving experience? Well, we are in the 130 horsepower version. There's also a 115 horsepower lower tier version available. And obviously we have to live with Toyota's CVT transmission, the continuously variable transmission. It's a bit of a departure from if you're used to a traditional gearbox, that it's sometimes a bit weird to hear the engine do things that might not correspond directly to what you're doing with the gas pedal. But in real life, after, let's say, a day or two, I've had this car for a week now, after a day or two you don't really pay attention to it anymore, and it just does what it needs to do. Depending a little bit on your driving mode, you get a bit more boost more often than not if you go for the power mode versus the eco mode, but those driving modes are pretty irrelevant in this car with this kind of power. Because let's face it, 130 horsepower is not a lot of power. Not even in a car that only weighs 1,200 and a bit kilos ready to drive. So it's a light car, but also obviously with a light engine with light power figures. That means that not in any time that I've had this car so far, you'll be thinking like, yes, I will be beating people at the traffic light or reaching incredible top speeds on the highway. Top speed is limited at 170, and this car will do 0 to 100 in about 11 seconds, just under. So yeah, it's not fast. Let's just cut to the chase there. That is not to be said that it is undrivable. It just requires a little bit of thinking here and there on what you're doing. You know, when you're behind a few trucks on the highway, you're not going to go for the blitzing overtake right before you take your exit. That is absolutely not happening in this car. You just have to realize the capacity of the car in that sense and drive accordingly. I said a similar thing in the review of the Kia Picanto, for example. You know, there's not a lot of power available, so you have to adjust your driving style a bit. And it's the same in this car. But I have to say also, honestly, at no point in the week that I've had this car right now, I felt inadequate or unable to do anything in sort of your day-to-day driving. So as far as that goes, 130 horsepower seems to be adequate for this car. With the side note that at no point you'll be thinking about racing or cornering or going fast and any of those things. Sitting here in the back of the Yaris Cross, you realize that it is not a big car, and therefore the space here in the back is compromised. With 4.20 meters, there's just less centimeters to work with, which is visible here, the fact that I'm sitting behind myself and I'm hitting the seat in front of me with my knees. I wouldn't say I'm fully stuck here. I can still move around quite easily, so that's okay. And the back of the seat is soft too. So it's not uncomfortable to sit here for a short journey. I wouldn't say that I'm going to sit here all the way to the Swiss Alps or anything, but you know, across town or for a short journey anywhere, let's say up to half an hour or something, I'll probably be fine back here. There's quite a lot of light through the middle of the car, thanks to the panoramic roof as well. But the shoulders of the seat are quite high. So if you're a kid sitting back here, your vision will hit the shoulder of the seat in front of you. So that, you know, doesn't help in terms of comfort back here. What does help is the amount of space I have for my feet. Plenty of space under the chair. Obviously, when you put the chair further down, it gets squashed a little bit, but there's easily enough room for me to move around here with my feet. So that is great. Other than that, it is pretty basic back here. So no USBs or anything here in the center console for charging or anything. Nothing going on here in terms of ventilation as well. So, you know, that is all very minimal. Same can be said here for the door panel. It's all hard plastic, not particularly comfortable. It's really a step back from the comfort in the front. And as well here we have the 1980s lock button and one unmarked window switch. So that's what you got to deal with here in the back. You can tell that I am almost touching the roof with my head here, and obviously by the size of my shoulders you can also see that I'm pretty much taking up the entire middle seat as well. So this is definitely not a space for 3 adults, 3 kids in a pinch maybe, but it's really a 2-person business back here. Especially when I move to the middle, you can see that I'm already like halfway into the seat here on the side. So that is really showing how it's not a wide car, you know, that's just what you got to deal with. And by the way, in the middle here, I'm sitting against the roof with my head. So anybody taller than 1.83 m, which is what I am, will be extremely uncomfortable back here. Something else that is slightly uncomfortable in terms of it being awkward is the middle console. If I pull this out with this loop here, you can see the cup holders that we saw in the boot earlier. I'm not so sure about this solution. Yes, it's a cup holder. Yes, it's a bit of functionality, but this is hard plastic that you use in the boot. Technically it is a middle console, but I don't really think this adds that much to the equation. So I'm not really sure why they've done that, but okay, it's there. Something else that is slightly uncomfortable, especially for people with kids, are the Isofix points. They're nicely covered like this, so you don't get any peanuts or M&Ms rolling in, but these covers are removable and they don't attach to the actual hole. So that is a disaster, because anybody with kids knows that as soon as you pull this out, this will fly away and you'll never see it again, and then you permanently have a hole there. And I'm sure you can buy these again from Toyota, but obviously that's not what you want. So this is not a good solution, Toyota. Don't do this. Other than that, it is the back seats of a relatively small crossover car. So, you know what you're going to get. This is really a 2-person affair. And as long as you keep that in mind, it is all fine back here. Now, the experience itself is actually quite pleasant. With under 4.20 m, it's not a huge car to maneuver, especially not in an urban environment or in tighter environments like parking garages and so on. It's easy to place thanks to the higher seating position. You have a good overview of what's happening around you. There's a large rear window as well, which is quite nice. So, you know, it's easy to place the car. It's nothing crazy in terms of feedback from the car, but it's also quite easy to be precise with your steering. So your inputs are translated quite well in terms of what the car does with them. So that's nice. That gives you, the confidence you need is a big say for a car like this, but it gives you a bit of confidence when maneuvering this car around. So that's actually quite nice. Now, personally, I'm not too much of a fan of car manufacturers taking an existing model and jacking it up to make a higher version like they've done here with the regular Yaris. This obviously is the slightly higher crossover version, because let's be honest, this is not an SUV. But in all fairness, when you look at the market, that's what the market demands. So, you can't fault Toyota for making this car. If there's a demand for it, why not? And I have to say, I can understand the underlying thoughts for going for this version over a regular Yaris, because it's slightly more practical, it's easy to get in and out, it's slightly easy to put kids in and out. All those things are, of course, true of all these crossovers. But with that, you get the penalty of slightly less efficiency in terms of aerodynamics and a slightly, larger body of the car. So that's that, but, fair enough for Toyota for making this car. Personally, I prefer the standard normal station wagons and hatchbacks more. It's more my kind of thing. Obviously, sitting here, I'm gonna have to find a few things to critique. The most obvious one is the fact that you feel cost cutting in several areas, not only here in the cabin, but throughout the whole car. The fact that there's no USB in the back, that flubbery thing in the boot, the lack of lights here, the fact that there's only 2 dome lights up here. Yeah, all those little things add up in terms of cost savings, but it also adds up in terms of the experience. When you start paying attention to it, you start to notice it. That said, when the accounting department gets involved, the car doesn't get too expensive, which is something to be happy about, I suppose. And it also doesn't ruin the driving experience in any way, shape or form. After obviously as a journalist, I'm looking at this a bit more critical than you would as your average consumer. And once I've identified the things and moved on, it's very much easy to live with. So that is all fine. I got my cheat sheet out because we've got to talk about the different versions of this Yaris Cross. So there's two engine types, 115 and 130 horsepower. The entry-level one is called the Active, starts at 31,000, and then you have the first edition for 33,000, both with the 115 horsepower engine. Up to 130, you have three options: the Executive for 37.5, the GR Sport for just under 40,000, and for just over 40,000, you have this Launch Edition, all with 130 horsepower engine, and obviously the spec levels increase with each step. So this one at 41,000 euro, it's a lot of toys and a lot of extras in this car. I don't think that's necessarily the one to go for. If you buy this as your primary vehicle, I think you're probably better off with the Executive version of the 130 horsepower one, which really is the one you should get, because 115 horsepower it's just not enough. This little bit extra might not sound like much, but I think you should get all you can get. The car itself, I understand why Toyota makes it. The market demands it. Great. I can see the practicality argument for a little bit of extra height, which is nice, but personally I would prefer the normal Yaris, but that's personal taste. There's not that much that goes wrong with this car. There's also nothing really that excites me about this car. It's a good transportation device. It's nice to move people and things around in relative comfort and relative style. I like the way it looks in this crossover form, because it is not an SUV, like I said. You do feel that the accounting department has been involved quite a lot in making this car. The little touches and the little things, you can feel the cost-saving measures, which is a bit of a letdown in a way, but nothing that really gets in the way of the experience of owning this car. And that's all I got for you in this video. Thank you very much for watching. Give it a thumbs up if you like this video. Any comments and suggestions are obviously welcome as well. We like to hear from you and like to improve our videos at all time. Please give it a sub to the channel too. That way you won't miss any other videos from us. And for then, I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers!